As the years go by, the messages you left in Dark Souls will fade. But not the letters you send to us at TripleClick. Those are forever. Welcome to TripleClick, where we bring the games to you. This week, we open up the mailbag to answer questions about preserving those Dark Souls messages, as well as why Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't have a DLC, and so much more. I'm Maddy Myers.
I'm Jason Schreier.
And I'm Kirk Hamilton, and hello.
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 Hi, my friends.
How are you guys?
It's us again.
Doing good.
We're here again. And hey, this week it's on me. I gotta tell the listeners about Maximum Fun. Somebody has to, and it's me. Yeah. I have to do it because I want to do it. And why?
Yeah, lucky Maddy, really. It's a privilege.
And why? Because Maximum Fun is a really cool podcast network. Always loved it. Loved it before we were even a part of it. Now we get to be a part of it. It's just an exciting time in my life. But it's also an exciting time for you, the listener, because, hey, you probably like that we don't have any ads on this show. And the reason why that is because many people, and perhaps also you, have gone to MaximumFun.org/join and they've become a member and they've clicked that little ticky box next to TripleClick saying they support us. And all those lucky people, all those wonderful people getting warm fuzzies from supporting us, they get access to our monthly bonus episodes and also all the other shows' bonus episodes. Like even the ones that you didn't put the ticky box next to, you get their bonus episodes if you want. But mainly they get ours. And ours include our most recent episode where we watched a couple of Christopher Nolan movies. We watched Inception and we watched Tenet and talked about them and how they are both similar and different and fascinating and kind of gamery in their own ways. And we have a bunch of other episodes that we've recorded together. And this upcoming month, we are going to record one of our occasional, that we've done this before, we're going to do a Marvel check-in. We're checking in on Marvel. What Marvel adaptations are happening in all of our lives? I've seen Deadpool and Wolverine. I have thoughts about it. I have plenty of thoughts on everything else that's happened. Robert Downey Jr. is coming back. We live in a strange world. Anyway, go to MaximumFun.org/join if you want to hear our thoughts on Marvel and also just our thoughts on Chris Nolan movies and a whole bunch of other video games that we've played. We did an episode about the Psychonauts 2 documentary series. Big backlog of eps there. So yeah, don't miss out on it. All right. Jason, what are we doing today?
This week, we are doing some burning questions. So we're going to answer some questions in our old mailbox, our old burn-in mailbox. Just a reminder, as always, you can reach us at TripleClick@MaximumFun.org if you have questions that you would like us to set on fire and then read. Just send them on over. And our, of course, regular reminder that we really like questions that are unusual and weird and interesting and also that are short. Keep them to a paragraph, folks. We don't need, as much as I love reading about everybody's life stories, we're not going to read them all on the show. So let's get to it, shall we? Maddy, why don't you kick us off with this first question?
Sure. So this one's from Nick, who writes, longtime caller, first time listener. I was playing Tales from the Borderlands with my wife, Amelia, and a silly jump scare startled her, and she hurt her neck, which took several days to recover.
Oh, no.
What weird ways have video games impacted your real life?
Okay, I have a fun story.
These are injuries, but go ahead, Jason.
I have a fun story, not injury-related story. Okay. I was in second grade or third grade, and we were like talking about American history, and everybody had to like find some way to like talk about the presidents. I think we were doing a president thing, and I was responsible for like doing something about Thomas Jefferson. And so I was really into this game called Sid Meier's Colonization. And the way colonization worked is it's kind of like a Civ game, if you think about those. Instead of like the wonders of the world, what you would do is you would get these founding fathers to join your American ongoing, American country, fledgling country, pre-country country. And the way that would work is every time you got enough Liberty Bells to reach a new founding father, you would see a screen pop up and it would be like, which of these 5 founding fathers do you want to recruit next? And it would be randomized. So you wouldn't see every single one. You would just get to select from 5 of like the 40 or something that existed in the game. And I was like, cool. Well, so this game has Thomas Jefferson in it. I'm going to show the teacher how it works. And so she gathered the class in front of the computer, and I had to pull up the game and start playing colonization. And so I kept playing and playing. And then every time I would get to a new founding father, Thomas Jefferson would not appear. And I would be like, sorry, I mean, he's going to show up. He's going to show up. And I had to keep playing and playing. And eventually we were like 40 minutes in and the class was over. And the teacher was like, Jason, like, what is going on here? I was like, sorry, it's random. You didn't show up. And I successfully used a video game to waste our entire class and like make people watch me play it. And we never did get to Thomas Jefferson. So that was extremely funny.
Rules, actually.
I feel like you really learned a lesson from that you applied to the rest of your life.
I did.
Yeah.
That's a good story.
Do you have one, Kirk?
Yeah, I have a couple. One that comes to mind that I've probably told on the show before is that I really got into Rock Band 2 in 08, 09 when I was still teaching high school jazz band in San Francisco. And I never loved the guitar, but I got really into the drums because Rock Band was the first game that let you play the drums. And the drums in Rock Band are a pretty reasonable facsimile for playing drums. Like there's no hi-hat pedal, but there is a kick pedal. And the parts that you learn are like basically drum parts. And I then, after a couple of months of intensive Rock Band playing, I had to sub for one of my students in a jazz combo. And we were playing like Red Clay or some like beginning funk tune. And I was like, oh, I'll fill in on drums. And I used to be able to do that okay. Like I would just kind of keep time for the kids as they played. But I started playing and it was this feeling of like my right foot just knew exactly what to do. And I started playing like offset kick patterns. And I was like, oh my God, I can play drums. And then I was like rocking out in this rehearsal, playing just way, way better than I'd ever played. And it was entirely because I had been drilling muscle memory playing Rock Band 2 or Rock Band 1. It was very cool.
Wow. I wish I had a story that good. I feel like all of mine are just physical injury related.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely gotten like sore thumbs and stuff from playing games too.
Oh, sure. Definitely. I feel like, I mean, it's not, none of my stories are that good. It's more just like me realizing that I had to get an arcade stick in order to play fighting games because after playing on pad for long enough, I just was getting so much hand pain that I was like, this is not tenable. And just like various points in my life when I've been like, I need to get more ergonomically sound in my life. That's really how video games have impacted my life in a boring way. It's just that I've been like, well, I should probably get a better chair and I should get better monitors and maybe I should have like a real couch and like all these other things as opposed to just like balancing all my stuff on a series of Bachelor-esque boxes in my life. And just I don't know. I mean, what weird ways did my old crappy gamer chair impact my life is the real question. I mean, I don't have that anymore. How many dates did I miss out on that came to my house and saw that?
Someone
and
saw the chair
never came
and
back
was just
again.
like,
We'll never know.
No.
We'll never know.
No.
But those are the extent of mine.
All right. Next question, Kirk.
This question comes from Eric, who writes, I was recently listening to your Baldur's Gate 3 Beans cast after finally finishing the game, and I found something interesting. At various points in the episode, you all discussed story-based DLC, or a story-based expansion, as if it was a sure thing, using when, not if statements to refer to the possibility. Damn.
Funny that we did that.
We've been owned by Eric. As Eric writes, we now know that Larian has no intentions of expanding the game with narrative expansions, and I can't help but notice that 2 other major releases from last year, Tears of the Kingdom and Spider-Man 2, also show no indication of expanding with downloadable content. It got me thinking, is the trend of near ubiquitous paid post-launch downloadable content a thing of the past? Has the rising cost of game development made the prospect of selling more content for $20 or $30 prohibitive? Are there other reasons for this trend that you can identify?
Yeah, I remember. So I started hearing like a decade ago around the time of like, I think I first started hearing it from BioWare people, like around Mass Effect 3 / Dragon Age Inquisition, that the drop off in players going from the game to the DLC was so significant that it was becoming less and less worthwhile. And then I started hearing that I think Naughty Dog was maybe the first one to do this, where they converted what was supposed to be Uncharted 4 DLC into a standalone product, and it did extremely well because it felt like a brand new kind of smaller scale game. And then we started seeing more people like do that sort of thing, take that approach of like, instead of doing a DLC, we're going to make Spider-Man Miles Morales, we're going to make this standalone
expand
product.
Alone, right?
Exactly, which I think is kind of a win-win, because you don't need to rely on having people pull out their old machines and their old game copies, their old discs, or re-download their games if they already uninstalled them, and instead you give them a brand new thing that kind of has the feel of a brand new game but is maybe smaller scale and costs less. So that is always a win-win. The other thing I think we've seen a lot of is game companies realize that rather than selling a DLC, they can actually release it for free and get a lot more financial benefit, because it'll develop word of mouth, it'll attract new players who will pick up the old game for this new stuff, or like it'll create a new buzz marketing cycle, and it'll be a lot more worthwhile. And we've seen that with like God of War Ragnarok's Valhalla expansion was released for free, which I think was a smart move as well. So yeah, I do think that we are moving away from the trend of DLC / expansions that rely upon you to have bought the game and then to go and buy the expansion. And I think that drop off is for good reason. Like, the three of us have talked before about how, like, when a DLC comes out, Elden Ring of course being the exception, which we can get into in a sec, but a lot of times when a DLC comes out, it's like, do you really want to relearn all the controls from that game you played a year ago or 2 years ago? Is it really worth it to go back in? And it feels like there's more of a barrier for entry than there would be with a brand new game.
There definitely is. And I mean, Elden Ring, we did have to relearn all the controls. And like, I was spending weeks ahead of time being like, how do I even play Elden Ring? I restarted a new character because I was like, I literally don't remember how to play Elden Ring. I don't know what any of this stuff is, and I'm scared. And that is a barrier to entry for me. It's why I don't always want to play a DLC, because I'm just like, do I want to go back and even remember what that is?
Elden Ring being an exception because the game is so humongous and so special that like people were willing.
It was worth it. But
and the DLC was so massive and kind of like shockingly huge and elaborate and like the size of a standalone game. You know, another exception that comes to mind that is interesting on its own terms is Cyberpunk 2077 and Phantom Liberty, because the Phantom Liberty DLC was like a classic old school expansion. I think I was reminded at one point by their PR to call it an expansion, because I was emailing with them and I was like, do you have a code for the DLC? And they were like, expansion code.
Not a DLC. Stop calling it that.
The expansion, which it was an expansion, and it coincided with the 2.0 release of that game. So it was kind of the two approaches happening at the same time, where we've seen a lot of like what you were describing, Jason, is the free update that just sort of revitalizes a game. Or, I mean, even something that like Baldur's Gate 3 got all kinds of free updates, and it wouldn't actually surprise me if they still did some sort of overhaul update where it's like, we've just added a bunch of stuff that you can just kind of find through the game to make it if you want to play it again, like in a year or two. I could still kind of see that happening. Not a discrete downloadable, expansion, but like just a sort of elaboration on the game.
The Game of the Year edition, you think they might like?
Yeah, maybe, or something like that, or even just a free update that they give to everybody. And with Cyberpunk, they did do that 2.0 update, which I've played a lot of and like love.
Oh, yeah.
I really thought it made the base game great. That was just free for everybody. And then Phantom Liberty was like the best thing in Cyberpunk. It was this really great story that was a totally new, a new area. It was a very classic feeling, like old school Bethesda game style expansion where just there's a new area in the map that you can now access, and there's all these cool quests in there, and they all feel kind of more advanced and elaborate and interesting because of all the lessons learned making the base game. It felt kind of old school, that part of it, in a way that I really appreciate it, even though I understand why it's less common now, because it's like a big financial investment to make in something that, only gets some small percentage of people who played the game in the first place.
It's a little different for a game like that where they really needed a makeover story too, right?
They had
where
an
almost like
incentive,
having
for sure.
a new entire marketing cycle is to their benefit in a way that it might not necessarily be for something like a Baldur's Gate 3, where it's like, okay, we did our thing. We won Game of the Year. Everybody loved it. We released a ton of great updates. And now, at least according to Larian, they want to move on and make another project. I mean, they don't need a big makeover story. They don't need to completely redo the game and then also have a reason to come back in the form of a new
I think with Baldur's
story.
Gate 3, it's more of a creative decision than a financial decision.
it
Because
seems
if they
so.
released an expansion for that game, it would do gangbusters, sort of like how Shadow of the Erdtree did. I think there are a few exceptions to the rule of like DLC doesn't sell, and I think Baldur's Gate 3 would be one of them. Larian Sven Vincke, the CEO and creative director on this game, he has come out and said essentially, like, we were working on a new Baldur's Gate thing, D&D thing, and we were all just kind of creatively zapped of working on D&D, and we were like, we would just want to do our own thing now. So I think that was the logic behind them not doing DLC, as opposed to them thinking, oh, it's not worth the investment because it's not going to sell. I think that totally would have sold.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely there are these sort of different varieties of downloadable expansions. Like there was, and we're kind of at an inflection point, I think. I think that's kind of what Eric is getting at, too.
Oh, yeah.
Is that, like, if you look at Dishonored, that's another game that had really amazing DLC in the first one. It was like Knife of Dunwall, Brigmore Witches. It was like a 2-part story. And it was really great. Like, it was better, I would say better than the base game. Then Dishonored 2 came out, and then instead of doing DLC for that, they made Death of the Outsider it was another expandalone situation where I think it was originally conceived as a similar kind of thing to the first game, and then they released it as its own game, and it's just a great Dishonored game on its own. And that was still that era, like that was several years ago. And now it's a lot less common to see that. Like, there was also the period of season passes for single player games, like all the Arkham games had that, or the first Spider-Man for PS4, where there was like a whole Black Cat side quest, or there were kind of like bigger and smaller things you would get, and I think you could buy a season pass for it, or you could buy them a la carte, and then they were all just that. This was a game, Spider-Man was a game that was a huge open world game with a huge map with so much to do that I'm sure most people who played that game did not come close to 100%ing it. And then they're like, well, if you want, you can pay us another $20 or $30 and you can get a bunch of like kind of okay side quests that would have just sort of been kind of okay side quests in the base game if they'd been included. And I don't know what the numbers are on those, but it wouldn't surprise me if the sales numbers are not that great and that it would maybe behoove the developers to just move on and start making something new.
So, yeah, okay. So DLC was a really popular thing back in the Dishonored days because there was this period where it was like, oh, we just released a game. We have all these people with nothing to do. Rather than lay them off, as we might have in the mid-2000s, we're going to have them all start working on DLC. And then a small group over here can start figuring out what's next. And then people can gradually move on to the next big thing. And it'll be this nice kind of pipeline sort of thing. That has changed for a couple of reasons. One is that more games are more servicey these days. A lot of games just are getting continual update cycles and content drops that people can can move on to when they're done with the game, rather than working on the big expansion or the expansion sets or whatever, the season pass. The other is that if you look at different studios, so like Insomniac is a good example, they have a bunch of different projects in development. So when they're done with Spider-Man 2, those people don't need to work on DLC because they can go work on Wolverine, or they can go work on Venom, or whatever else they have like in development. Another example might be Sucker Punch with Ghost of Tsushima. They're a one game studio, but so when everyone's done with Ghost of Tsushima, instead of maybe some people go and work on the sequel, everyone else goes and works on this kind of unique, not DLC expansion because it's free with Ghost of Tsushima Legends, that multiplayer thing that they came out with.
Ghost of Tsushima also had paid DLC, remember? There's like that island that you can
it
go
did
to.
Yes, that expansion. Yeah, you're right. So
it was
they
good
went
too.
and so actually that kind of addresses the question of like they're a single project studio, so those people don't have another project to kind of peel off onto, so instead they're working on the DLC Legends, and then you're right, that Iki expansion, and also PC version. So there are other projects that people can be be moving on to these days at a lot of these studios. Naughty Dog, another example. With Larian, I mean, I'm not actually sure what their 700 people are all doing. Presumably they have things to work on, but yeah, that problem has been solved to a greater extent of like the question of what are all these people going to work on after this game ships. With Baldur's Gate 3, it's probably the answer is probably they released so many patches and updates that they had a lot of people continually working on like the epilogue stuff and all the other things without necessarily having to do a big expansion. So financially, it makes sense these days to not be doing these big expansions, except in rare cases. All right, next question. This is from Luke. I've been having a blast with Manor Lords, a fantastic new city building sim that was made by one guy over a span of 7 years. It joins a long list of fantastic games in recent years that have been created by just one individual. Obra Dinn, Stardew Valley, and Balatro, to name a few. In fact, it seems that these projects are often more innovative and interesting than their well-resourced brethren. How is it possible for someone working alone to outperform the work of well-resourced dev teams?
I mean, this is an age-old question, right? Of risk tolerance and creative vision, right? It's sort of those two things, and they're very different when it's one person versus a large team. And the bigger the team gets, the more the creative vision can be diluted, and the more it can be compromised by a lowered risk tolerance because more and more money is involved and more people's careers are at stake. And so you kind of, those two things move in inverse proportion to one another.
And also, I mean, we talked about this a lot on the Stardew Valley episode. These games are not all really made by just one person. I know Manor Lords, it's like kind of the illusion of that.
Well, except for Stardew Valley.
But the question, I get the spirit of the question,
of course,
particulars aside.
but I do think that's part of how it's possible, is because you have one person whose vision is central to this thing, and then they just hire for like a musician to help them, or artists to help them, or contractors to do specific work on their one thing. And so then it's just a matter of like, okay, this one united creative vision is present, and then it seems possible for this sort of almost magical thing to be created because it's like it's the inception of one person, and that's what you're seeing. That feels that creative through line is the thing you're seeing that feels magical, not just the fact that it's one person doing it, if that makes sense. I
mean, there are a couple of cases. Stardew is the most kind of we talked about last time how
like
that
closest to just one. Yeah.
Well, it is just one, other than
it's
the funding.
Literally a guy.
The funding being his girlfriend, but
Eric
I mean, I don't think we're talking about funding in this context here. It really is just the one guy. And Animal Wall is another example where it was just Billy Basso making that game. He did all the graphics, he wrote all the music,
right,
et cetera, et cetera.
and did write all the music.
And I think that like one of the reasons, yes, Kirk's point I think is very true. I think another reason is that it's a lot more efficient to work on your own because you don't have to communicate and you don't have to have meetings and you don't have to think about like what another person is doing.
At communicating.
Right. You don't have to. Well, that's why some people do. You don't have to have check-ins. You don't have to have production conversations. I think that like if you have 2 people or 10 people working on something, you can get more done more quickly, but that production can be hampered by the fact that you're having to constantly communicate and check in and make sure that it's like everyone agrees on the vision and make sure that all of the stuff is up to the quality bar set by the creative director or whatever. So the trade-off there can be pretty vast. And I think the main reason that a lot of people wind up going and working with other people for their smaller projects is because they are not capable skill-wise of doing all of the different disciplines, art and programming and design and music and so on and so forth. Whereas when someone is capable of doing all those things, they can really make something special. It just takes a long time. I mean, that's the other part that Luke mentioned is created over 7 years. I mean, that's what you kind of sacrifices is if you are doing something by yourself, it's going to take a lot longer than if you're doing it with a team, despite that efficiency trade-off.
So these days, there are plenty of huge teams that take more than 7 years to make a
That's true.
That's true. That's
absolutely true. And that is where the efficiency comes into play on the opposite end. It's kind of this shifting bar, I suppose, that you can that a lot of, depending on the project, you can go in all sorts of different levels.
Yeah.
Man, you guys remember Balatro? When that came
it was
out?
so good.
I was just thinking about that game. I think I saw like a funk instrumental cover of the music on YouTube, and I was just listening to this guy like play the music, and I was like, man, That was
What a
such a
good
good game.
song.
I want to go play Balatro.
I mean,
was
he's
really
gonna release some new stuff. I
hope.
imagine.
Really?
And
One imagines.
I feel like I saw the creator teasing something just this week about.
Oh man,
new
that's
Balatro stuff,
exciting.
so,
Yeah,
what a good
that is
game.
I'm sure
exciting.
there'll be reasons to revisit it. Okay, Maddy, read us this next question.
Sure. So this one's from Dan, who writes, your recent conversation about Shadow of the Erdtree, and specifically about in-game messages, got me thinking about the ephemerality of solo games that have some non-required social aspects. My first full playthrough of Dark Souls happened during the period when the servers were down, meaning I played through the game with no social messages and no invasions outside of a few scripted ones. It really made the world feel empty, and I felt like I was missing out on getting the full game experience. Similarly, I recently played through Bravely Default on the Nintendo DS, a game that has a whole village building mode and summoning mechanics based around the now defunct Street Pass. Wow. It again felt like there was something missing. I know there has been a lot of discussion about games as a service, where there is this impending doom of the day that the servers shut down and the game will disappear. But I was curious if you had thoughts about these games that are solo with a smidge of multiplayer. How do you feel about this sort of design? Do you feel the initial fun of social aspects in a solo game outweighs the inevitable server shutdown? Do you imagine a world where, for game preservation purposes, we could find a way to support these games?
Well, on the last question, I think that having other players might be a bigger impediment than server shutdown. Like, how many other people are playing Bravely Default to the point where you could be collecting street passes,
Playing
out there?
Journey on PS3
Right,
now.
exactly. That said, I do think the social aspects outweigh like any potential negatives. Like, I don't think it's worth being like, no, we're not going to include this cool, innovative multiplayer idea because it might not work 10 years from now. Like, I think it's okay for some games to have that kind of ephemeral, you had to be there sort of thing. And that could be that can manifest in all sorts of ways. Pokemon Go might be another good example of like, if
That'd
you
be a
weren't
graveyard.
playing it during the craze, then you missed out on something special. And like, that's fine. It's fine for like some things to be ephemeral, I think. Although it does suck when like you can't play Destiny 1 with Peter Dinklage anymore. So there are some
that's what
aspects
sucks,
of it.
yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
more the
True.
game as service as opposed to the solo game with multiplayer that Dan was writing about.
Yeah, I do feel sad about the Dark Souls thing, and it's probably why I never will go back, because my version isn't the Prepare to Die edition. It's the original version that I'm halfway through, and therefore I don't have the messages anymore
And
because they turned them off.
no way to transfer your save between
No.
the two versions.
I have
or, like,
looked into
convert it?
that.
Ah, that sucks. Yeah, no, I'm sure. I just wasn't sure.
But I'm also like, it probably wouldn't take me that long if I just started a new game. Because what was hard about it was not knowing where everything was. And now I know where everything is. But do I really want to play through Sen's Fortress again? Like, I just beat it, and it was such an ordeal. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That's not really what Dan is asking. The point is, the messages in Dark Souls are really wonderful, and I don't know of a good way to preserve them. And I almost wish that the game had something baked in that would, like, save them in some way, even though they kind of don't belong to the game. Like, it's not like there's I don't know if there's, like,
How would it
copyright
choose
issues
which
with
ones
that
to
or
save?
something.
No, I could sort of imagine a fix where they basically take the most upvoted,
Right.
Messages of all time, in a game like Dark Souls, right, or Bloodborne that's been around for years, where there are definitely messages that have just gotten thousands upon
Yes.
thousands upon thousands of likes. And then you actually just create an update that bakes them into the game for like an offline mode. I don't know
Yeah.
if they would do that, or maybe that's one of those things that's harder than it sounds like, but I could see them doing that just to kind of preserve the spirit of that. And you could maybe toggle it on and off in the menu, because I can see wanting to have that feeling of connection to other players, even if it's just players from the past.
Yeah, like
and there
the
are no more
ghosts.
servers because no one's online.
So when the producers on a game team are like looking at the scope and the timeline and the schedule and being like, all right, how are we going to hit this deadline that we have to hit? What can we cut? I think the parts of the things on the schedule, the tasks on the schedule that are like, do this thing so the game can still be enjoyed 20 years from now, those will be the first to go.
Yeah, I guess what I'm imagining is something that they would take the time, or even, I don't know, like some other company could do now to a game like Dark Souls, rather than something they would have done while developing. To come in and do something like that.
There's also a practical element of that. That said, I told you guys a few weeks ago that I've been replaying Final Fantasy XIV with a new character, and part of the Final Fantasy XIV main quest requires you to go through old dungeons and old boss fights that involve getting together with other people. And while the game is active enough that you can still make a party with other people and find it pretty seamlessly, the game now also gives you an option of filling out your party with NPCs instead, which is a cool way of, that's useful for a couple of reasons, but first and foremost, because if the game ever gets to the point where there aren't enough players to support getting through those old dungeons, then that would be a serious problem, because you need to play through them to get through the story. Otherwise, you cannot progress.
Yeah.
So having NPCs in there is helpful. And I imagine there are clever solutions that other games, that single player games, could do as part of their multiplayer components. But then again, there's some games that you literally cannot play today. So just filling, when it comes to preservation, I think filling in the supplemental aspects of games that are otherwise fine these days, I think is pretty low on the priority list, as opposed to making sure that people can still access games that have since lost all support.
Yeah.
Right. That's the important distinction, is between something ephemeral and kind of neat that adds to the vibe of the game versus something that's required.
Exactly.
And Souls games tend to, they only make the online stuff ephemeral. It's always just a cool thing. You can summon NPCs. You don't have to summon other players. Being invaded is not an essential part of the game, even though I guess some people would say it is. It's more just about the vibe. Man, this makes me think of the first time I played Journey, when I reviewed Journey in, I guess, 2014 for Kotaku. I played through it, and I think I was online, but there just wasn't anybody else playing. So I just ran through that game basically it was a walking simulator with some light puzzle solving.
Oh, that's so sad.
Well, I thought it was really cool, actually. I had a really profound experience with it. I found it to be this beautiful, metaphorical, audiovisual experience, and I really was moved by it. And then I played it again, and people were online because the game had come out, and I rediscovered it and found this whole new way of playing it. So it was actually really neat. I sort of accidentally played a version that, is incomplete. It was definitely not the primary vision of that game, which was meant to be this seamless, wordless multiplayer thing where you're going through the journey of life and relying on other people and helping one another. But without that it actually wound up being a different and very cool experience. So that's just an interesting aspect of this as well, that missing out on those things can actually just transform the game into something that is maybe cool too.
That is neat. I didn't even know you could do that in Journey, that you can't experience it alone.
Yeah, because you could play it offline.
Yeah, you could.
Not be on the internet, play on your handheld or something.
All right.
Really
Kirk, read the next question, please.
This next question comes from Bill, who writes, "It is a universal truth that double jumps are twice as good as single jumps." It's just math. I agree with Bill on this one. Bill continues, "If you could pick between double jumps and a single jump that covered the same distance, what would you choose, and why is it still the double jump?"
Of course it's still the double jump.
It is.
Yeah.
It is still
the double
jump.
is better because you're covering the same distance, but it's also more versatile. So you can redirect in the middle. Look, I play as a hunter in Destiny. I was always a hunter. And there's always the question of, do you want the double jump that goes really high or the triple jump that doesn't go quite as high?
That's
and
right.
the answer is always, I want the triple jump because I want more control over where I go. So I think that is a pretty straightforward answer to that pretty straightforward question.
And also it adds a little bit of safety to the jump. You don't have to worry about just jumping once. You have that kind of backup jump. You're
Cool. Whoops, never mind.
All right, I'm good. The
Yeah.
double jump is awesome. It's why when you're jumping in Super Mario World, you always want Yoshi so you can jump off him just in case and get a double jump as a result.
Yeah, of course, obviously. Sure. I think it's also the fantasy, because no one in our reality can do a double jump. It's purely a video game thing.
I think LeBron James can maybe do a double jump. I think I might have seen him do one once.
Unless you go to the volcano Mount Etna and you get the boots that are buried in the middle that can unlock the double jump.
Right.
Yeah,
that might be what LeBron did.
That is what LeBron did. Yes.
Yeah, that's a special secret. But I think that's part of it, is just the idea that it's this special video game thing that you unlock and you're like, yes, this is it. This is my feeling of being more powerful than ever. It's the best. That's why.
Yeah.
And just one really long jump wouldn't be the same as that. It's just not.
And even better than the double jump is the double jump plus the air dash.
Yes,
so
of
that's
course.
real. All right, let's do one last question. This is from Mike. Mike says, I was wondering if you ever find yourself enjoying a game in a way that was likely not intended by the developers. When I was younger, me and my brother and cousins had an unusual way of playing WWF Royal Rumble on the Sega Genesis. We would start a match, then immediately get eliminated on purpose, and then watch the computer wrestlers finish the match, which would take quite a while. As I remember it, we would place bets on who would win and roughhouse with each other at the same time. It was like making our own little 32-bit pay-per-view. It was an absolute blast. Later in college, my friend group would play Guitar Hero on the hardest difficulty by laying the controller down in the middle of the dorm room floor and each controlling just one input on the guitar. These are the kinds of gaming memories that really stick with me.
These are incredible. They're perfect. That's the way that both games should be played, in my opinion.
It's true.
Yeah, do any of us have any of these? I'm not sure. I mean,
all of mine are Super Smash Brothers related. So first of all the different ways of playing Super Smash Brothers are now, I would say, enshrined by the developers, in that they actually have modes in Super Smash Brothers Ultimate that you can design yourself. So if you have a weird set of rules for Super Smash Brothers, the game allows you to do that. But in old versions of Super Smash Brothers, that wasn't necessarily enshrined in the game, and so my friends and I would have a variety of different rules that we would implement for the game. I mean, some of them you can do in the game itself. You can set all items to high. Every character is a Pokemon, and it's only Pokeballs. That's obviously the best way to play. You never have any idea who's thrown which Pokeball, so you're just avoiding every single Pokemon's attacks, which is great. And like any sort of like friendly fire, what I don't even know how to refer to this, like your own Pokemon wouldn't necessarily be attacking you, but you would assume that it would be friendly fire because every Pokemon is evil in the scenario. You don't know any better. Also, there's like the all bees version when they added bees to Super Smash Brothers. That's like a really fun way to play.
beads?
Yeah, I will also say, yeah, bees. Yeah.
Joke's not on board.
And then also in high school, I remember one of my friends had like a couple older cousins who liked to get high, but we were all squares and none of us did any drugs at all. So we did this thing where we would just set our characters to be NPCs that were up to 10, and we would pretend that it was us playing against these older cousins who would be too high to realize that they were actually just playing against level 10 computers. So that's another really cool way to play Super Smash Brothers if you just want to take advantage of people because you're too cool to do drugs and you're me in high school. And that's not how it's intended to be played at all. You're supposed to know when you're playing against the computer for sure.
Yeah, I think having like house rules is not super uncommon. When I play like Mario Party on Mario Party 2 is a common one, but really any Mario Party game with some friends who we play together, we have a house rule that is like no looking at the map, which makes it a lot more challenging to try to figure out where the stars are, and you have to like pay attention to where Toad goes, and that's a fun way of playing it. And then of course Smash. We in college we always used to play. No items was just our kind of our go-to way because items are too chaotic and we want strategy here, or we would actually
Fox only, Final Destination.
We didn't actually play no items. We turned off all the overpowered items like the hammers and the and some of the other annoying ones. But yeah, I mean, Kirk always goes on about wanting multiple difficulty settings. I think that is one good way that you can kind of like, but I don't know if this is ever like unintentional, like the house rules stuff, the stuff that you and I are talking about, Annie. I don't know if those are ever like playing the game in unintended ways.
If anything, I think that over time Smash became a game that fully embraced all of those ways.
Exactly. I think maybe speedrunning would be the closest, but I can't think of any times when I really jumped into like, I'm going to play this in an unintended way.
Yeah, I think this is a little similar to our conversation about cheating, where some of these house rule situations can then gradually morph into an accepted thing that the developers start adding to the game. Yeah. I mean, I always think about Ben Abraham's permadeath journey through Far Cry 2. He's a game critic and academic who wrote this really amazing series way back in the day in like 2010 maybe, where he played Far Cry 2 permadeath, where he made his own rules because there was no way to play Far Cry 2 where you don't respawn. But he was like, okay, if I die, I die. And then took the game on those terms and then wrote these kind of diary like blog post entries as he played his way through it, and it was a really cool thing. I mean, I think I remember like Clint Hocking, the designer of the game, like read them and was really into it. And that's the kind of thing that has become much more commonplace now in games where there is just a hardcore mode or a permadeath mode where you can play where your character dies if they die, and then have that experience like built into the game. But at the time, that kind of thing, it's a little similar to what I talked about last week in GTA 4, like turning off the map and the HUD to the point where it does feel like this is not what the developers intended. Like it's just weirdly stripped down and zoomed in and kind of overwhelming, but then that made for a very fun like moment to moment experience, just having a one handgun and like shooting at a cop and running away and seeing what happened. And like it wasn't really like, I mean, it is playing GTA 4. It's very true to what that game is about, mayhem in the streets of the city, but it doesn't quite feel intended because it's so kind of opaque and difficult to get your head around and kind of challenging and strange. But I mean, those kinds of ways of playing games I think are really cool.
Yeah, for sure. Anything that makes the game harder can potentially be really fun. Like I remember when I was a kid, I would play Tetris with a rule that I had to be pressing the down arrow every time, and I would just see how fast I could play Tetris and still win. Do you get what I'm saying?
Nice.
Like I would just always be pressing down, and then you'd like also try to press over. But I mean, that's just like that could be the way that Tetris was intended.
Just like kicking up the tempo on an etude or something. You just want to play it faster. That's rad. That's hardcore.
I mean, it was fun. I don't know. It was really just when you're a child, you only have so many games. So you're like, well, how many different ways can I play the 5 games that I have? And I don't have any mods. So like all I can do is modify my own ways of playing. That's definitely what Mike's letter reminded me of. I mean, even the idea of like playing, everyone is controlling the controller together. Like I can picture it in my mind's eye. It's like, why would you play Guitar Hero that way? That rules though.
Right. Yeah, that does seem like a great way to play it. Well, and I mean, wrestling during the like background AI fight in a wrestling game is really good.
It rules. It rules.
All right. We have like an extra minute, so I'm going to throw in a bonus question.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, nice. This is DLC. This is some free DLC.
A listener named Nick wrote in saying like he finally listened to Blood, Sweat, and Pixels and he loved it and can't wait for Play Nice. So I have a third book coming out that I've talked about. We'll talk about more later. And he writes, Maddy and Kirk should write books too. Would love to read Maddy on a history of Metroid and Kirk on music theory of platformers. So I had a question. So I've written books. I have my new book coming out. If you two could each write a book, what would it be about? That's my bonus question.
I don't know if it's going to happen. I've certainly considered it, and I've even put together proposals, but I feel like I've realized how lonely of an experience writing a book is, and I'm just not sure I have the affect for it. But it probably would be a history of Metroid. Let's be honest. Like I'm a one-trick pony. That's probably what I would do. I feel like I would read the hell out of that. I would have to do like a lot of interviews. Like I would need to have it be a more social experience because I've sort of realized that's how I work. I really like being on a team, and I like not just feeling like I'm all alone. I've recorded solo music enough times to kind of know like I like having other people be a part of a project with me, and a book isn't usually that way. So I would probably need either a co-writer or for it to be like very interview based. So
wait, so to answer the question, it's Metroid, history of Metroid.
Yeah, sure. Answer. I guess I answered the question in a more ephemeral and emotional way. I couldn't help it because I feel like that is part of what they're asking.
Kirk, what's your answer?
Yeah, mine would be a music book. I actually have a concept for it. I won't detail it too much because it's still kind of in
it could happen.
Gestational phases. Oh yeah, I think this actually will happen at some point.
Oh, that's great.
But I'll say that I'm kind of following the Schreier model where
we both are.
Well, it'll be, I think, pretty broad. And I like the idea of starting with something broad because it would be my first nonfiction, like my first book. And then maybe depending on how that goes and how I like it, writing something more specific. And I think that's worked really well for you, Jason.
When you talk about broad, are you talking anthology style as well?
Yeah, like talking about a lot of different aspects of music and sort of putting them into book form and like being really broad and wide with a wide range that's sort of a pretty broad appeal. And then later, just be like, there's a million musical figures or concepts or like stories that would be fun to maybe write a book about. Sure. I don't know if I'd want to, but I could see that being great. I mean, just take your pick. But I think I would start with something pretty broad, or at least that's the idea I've been playing with. And who knows, maybe one day, one of these years, I'll actually announce something like that on the show. But it is something that I've thought about.
You should do it.
Video game related or no?
Oh.
No, I think it would
music.
It would be music. There would maybe be some discussion of video game music, but no, I actually don't think that I would write a book about video game music specifically.
Cool. All right. Well, on that note, thank you to everybody who sent in questions, and we will be taking a break right now and then coming back with one more thing.
Hey, do you have a favorite episode of Star Trek?
If you do, you should also have a favorite Star Trek podcast.
Greatest Trek is about all the new streaming Star Trek shows, and it's a great companion to The Greatest Generation, our hit show about back catalog Star Trek that you grew up with.
It's a comedy podcast by two folks who used to be video producers, so it's a serious mix of comedy and insight that fits right into the Maximum Fun network of shows.
And Greatest Trek is one of the most popular Star Trek podcasts in the world.
So if you're following Lower Decks, Prodigy, or Strange New Worlds, come hang out with us every Friday as we roast and review our favorite Star Trek shows.
It's on MaximumFun.org, YouTube, or your podcatching app.
From the twisted minds that brought you the Adventure Zone, Balance and Amnesty and Graduation and Ethersea and Steeplechase and Ultraspace and all the other ones, the McElroy brothers and Dad are proud to reveal a bold vision for the future of actual play podcasting. It's called the Adventure Zone versus Dracula.
Yeah, we're gonna kill Dracula's ass. We're gonna attempt. We haven't recorded all of it yet. We will attempt to kill Dracula's ass. The Adventure Zone versus Dracula.
Yes, a season I will be running using the D&D 5th edition rule set, and there's 2 episodes out for you to listen to right now. We hope you will join us. Same bat time, same bat channel for more fun.
I see what you did there.
Break over, Kirk or Maddy. It is time for one more thing. Maddy, start us off.
Sure. So Dina and I have completed watching a television show called Hacks that was recommended to me by a man named Kirk Hamilton.
I'm so happy.
Who thought I was already watching it and said something to me like, "Aren't you excited for season 3 of Hacks?" And I was like, "I don't know what that is."
I don't know what that is.
I guess I am now. And honestly, having watched it, I really don't know why I had never heard of it before. It is incredibly good. We like watched it all in a whack. Like we got obsessed with it, and we were like, we have to watch this show every single night until there are no more episodes to watch. That's how good Hacks is. I really recommend it. So this is a show about a fictional comedian played by Jean Smart. And she is like an older woman. She's, what's the name of that famous female comedian who she's kind of
Joan Rivers.
Joan Rivers, of course.
Joan Rivers, who I did a show with once, I will just say. And she made fun of us on stage. I performed with Joan Rivers.
Of course she did. Yeah.
A legend. A true real-life legend. Joan Rivers. Unbelievable lady.
And the character, Deborah Vance, is sort of a similar like insult comic style of like she's an older woman, she tells a lot of misogynistic against herself kinds of jokes,
a long salty history,
but also insults everyone that you can imagine, but also like, you know, was in a man's world and working had all these things working against her, and you know, has like a crappy ex-husband, and list goes on. So her situation is she's been doing this stage show at a casino in Vegas for just years and years and years and years, and it's getting extremely stale. And her team is basically like, the show is on the brink of death, and it's absurd that you're still trying to do live comedy shows, and you should probably just retire from that and just like do infomercials for the rest of your life. And she refuses to. She's like, no, I have to do a live comedy show every night for the rest of my life until I die. And they're like, okay, well, you should probably hire somebody to help you write better jokes then, which I don't even know if this is a real thing that happens or not, but it happens on the show. And she ends up working with this sort of like down on her luck, like kind of older Gen Z comic who's played by Hannah Einbinder. And the charisma between these two actresses is just freaking unstoppable. Like, it's
incredible chemistry.
There are parts of it that are like a little bit like what you dream would be a conversation between like a boomer and a Gen Z person, like in the sort of fantasy way of like two female comedians like talking about how different their lives are and how different their perspectives on comedy are, and like the idea of like, should you apologize for a joke? That's kind of like what season 3 is about. But like, and some of it almost feels a little surreal, but some of it feels very real and very grounded in the reality of like just workaday comedy writing and like being too personal with your jokes, and like what should you say, and like how hard it is to come up with this much material and who it's for, and like how personal should you be in your act. So I mean, it's a bitingly funny show. It's a really mean show. The two lead women are absolutely anti-heroines in the best possible way. They're both kind of unlikable, but also therefore very likable at the same time. It's hilarious and dark and sad at times, and just really, really good. And I can't recommend it enough if you like any kind of anti-heroine kind of a thing and comedy. Nice. Hacks is what it's called. Like, you know, the pejorative that you would say about a bad comedian. You might call them a hack. It's that, but plural. And yeah, it's really, really good. I really recommend it.
It's on Max, right? It's on HBO Max.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds right.
It's a Max show.
Hacks on Max?
They're the modern female Walter White and Jesse Pinkman.
A little bit, man. I'm so glad that you like it. I love that show.
Oh, it's
and I'm
so
really glad you watched
good.
it.
It's so good.
It's amazing. Everyone should watch
really,
it.
really, really good.
Cool. Yeah, great show. Kirk, what is your one more thing?
Well, my one more thing is another Brandon Sanderson book that I read.
It's so funny you're still reading these.
Cool. Oh, yeah, man. He's great. He's so fun. And it was really remarkable how excited so many people got when I talked about Brandon Sanderson. Like, I got more emails about that than I have about anything in a while.
That's so cute.
It was just a lot of people being like, oh, man, I'm so glad you read Elantris. A lot of people actually saying, oh, Elantris and Warbreaker are like his weakest books. Mistborn is so much better.
It's going to get even
better.
better.
I already had, I actually just bought the 3-book box set, like the paperbacks of Mistborn, because you can get them for cheap now. So I already had those because I was like, yeah, man, I'd read a big fantasy saga that's finished and by this writer that I've been really enjoying. So
it's finished.
Oh, I know, man. Very key point. So these books, there are 3 of them. I read the first one, which is titled Mistborn. They were written between 06 and 08. That dude can write, man. It's really wild when you go look at his output and just how long it took him to write a fantasy trilogy. Like, he wrote it in 2 years.
Yeah, it's
I don't know if that's actually how long it took him, but something like that. He writes very, very quickly. He's extremely prolific. And Mistborn is one of his most famous books and most famous series. And I gotta say, you know, the people who said that it is better than Elantris and Warbreaker, I see what they're saying. It's a really, really enjoyable romp. I mean, it is just an action-packed thrill ride, a super fun book. I found things about Warbreaker and Elantris that I really liked. You know, I also like those books on their own terms, and they're both standalones, where Mistborn definitely feels like it's ready to be continued in 2 more books, because it is. But it's also a really satisfying story on its own. So it is I definitely recommend it. I don't know if anyone out there listening is thinking about getting into Brandon Sanderson, you could start with any of these 3 books. They're all just total crowd pleasers. They go down really easy. They have great characters. They're really fun. But I do think Mistborn is a really strong starting point. So just to give a quick sort of synopsis for anybody, it's a fantasy story. It's got a lot in common with The Matrix, actually, and it has that same thrill that The Matrix has, basically of uncovering latent powers within yourself and then being really being the underdog, like being super overmatched by the enemy, and then working up and building for a long time toward a confrontation where, as the audience, you're like just thrilled and not sure how it's going to go because the bad guys are so powerful and scary. In this world, it's like, basically there's like a lord ruler who's essentially, he has like godlike powers, and he has a whole army and these sort of these steel inquisitors under him who are like unstoppable immortal beings, and he just rules the world. And all of this whole group of people have just been enslaved and are living in like just misery. And they're kind of like separated out from the nobility. They're called the ska. So they play trombone and they wear like Chuck Taylors and they dance
skinny ties.
Terrifying.
Skinny ties and checkered jackets.
And to fight them, you have to pick it up.
Of course.
Right. You should, of course. That is the moral of the story. So the ska are kind of like an underclass that is oppressed and have been oppressed for centuries or even millennia, for so long that like no one remembers what the world was like before this. And the world is like really like barren. There's volcanoes everywhere, and like it rains. There's ash fall from the sky all the time. And like it's just awful. Like they live this awful life. And it's the story of a group of ska who are kind of disguised as nobility, who are all sort of of different kinds of thieves who come together and make a plan to overthrow the Lord Ruler, like this godlike being who is so unstoppably powerful that it just seems like an insane plan. And the whole time they're talking about it, the guy organizing it, Kel, one of the two main characters, like everyone's like, you're going to get us all killed. This is impossible. But I mean, what else are we doing? Let's just do it. So the two main characters are Kel, the guy who is like a very powerful Mistborn. I'll describe that in a second. And then Vin, who's a young girl who's kind of the actual main character. She's the Neo, who is basically discovers that she is Mistborn and has all these powers that she didn't know about, and winds up playing an integral role in their big like year-long plan to overthrow the government. The cool thing about this book is the magic system. And this has been true through all of these Sanderson books. Each one actually has a really interesting magic system. Like in Warbreaker, it was this chromatic aura thing where like colors, you like drain the power from color and use the frequencies of color for magic. So he always comes up with these neat, like hard magic systems where there are all these rules and you really understand how they work. Mistborn's magic is like a showstopper. It's the coolest thing in the book, where you ingest small amounts of metals, and each metal, this is only if you're Mistborn, like if you have this like genetic trait, you ingest metals, and then you can burn the metal, it's called, inside of yourself, and it gives you a certain ability. There's a lot of Dishonored in here, actually. I feel like the Dishonored writers kind of read Mistborn, because you can have like enhanced eyes, where suddenly you can see, or you can get really strong. If you burn pewter, you get really strong. And so on. Some of them are just kind of basic like that. But the coolest thing is, I think it's like steel and iron. And if you burn those two metals, it gives you the ability to pull metal toward you or to push metal away from you. But what that means is
Magneto,
like, according to the, well, kind of, but then again, not like Magneto, because physics play a role in a way that they don't for Magneto. And it's a really crucial part of how it works. And he's very strict to the physics of it, and that leads to a much more interesting power set where, okay, so if you want to move around really quickly, everyone who can do this, especially if you're Mistborn and you can like do all the metals at once, whatever, all this, the specifics aren't that important. You carry coins around with you, and you throw a coin down onto the ground, and if you push the coin, it pushes away from you until it hits the ground, and then you push away from the coin. So if you pull something toward you that's heavier than you, you go flying toward it. If you pull something toward you that has less mass, it comes toward you. So in a fight, that'll mean like pulling a guy in armor toward you and then knocking him to the ground and then pushing off of him to go flying through the air. And there's a lot of like unbelievable aerial combat where people are like pulling and pushing metal and like flipping around. There's like a sequence where a guy is in steel bars and he gets thrown through the air, but he's like pushing against the bars to float in the middle of the bars. And Sanderson can write action. It's something that I actually didn't see in the first two books that I read of his. His action sequences are like watching The Matrix. Like it's like an anime. It feels like you're watching anime where he'll describe these like incredible flourishes of like, combat, and like, and it's so lucid and clear that you can picture it like very, very clearly. Like the cool thing that Kel just did is he flipped through a room and like blocked two guys and pulled another one up and like stabbed a dude and like dropped the sword and flipped underneath, and you really just get this very visceral sense of each fight. It really feels like you're kind of watching a movie at times, and I found that really enjoyable. Like I don't look for that in every book that I read, but I was really impressed by writing action, especially as it builds, and it just builds and builds. And then, of course, like I was saying, there are these Steel Inquisitors. There are these enemies they have to fight who are basically agents from the Matrix, who are so powerful and unstoppable that once it's time to really fight one, you're like, oh my God, like what is going to happen? And it's very exciting. So that's just a few stray thoughts on Mistborn. It's a very fun book. Again, it's the same thing I've said about Sanderson before. Anyone looking for just like a very breezy read that's like more sophisticated with better characters and more enjoyable writing than you might expect from this kind of book. Like it really is a very well put together story with good characters and great writing. I really enjoyed it. Mistborn, it's good. I can't wait to read the next one. I might not make it my one more thing, but who knows? I might. He's a very fun writer.
Cool. So my one more thing is also a fantasy book. It's called The Bright Sword by LouisF Grossman.
Hell yeah. I'm psyched to read this.
You haven't read it yet, right, Kirk? You said
no,
you're
but I'm
psyched to read it.
I'm psyched to
so
read
this
it, yeah.
is a new book by the writer of the Magicians trilogy, which people described way back in the day as adult Harry Potter. And this is, I think, could be aptly described as adult King Arthur. And so what LouisF Grossman does is he has this is a story set in the King Arthur mythology, but it's got an interesting twist, which is that it is about a aspiring knight named Colum who goes to Camelot and finds that, hey, actually, King Arthur is dead, and so are most of the knights of the Round Table, and the people who are left, the people who are remaining, are kind of the dregs, the lowest of the low, and the misfits of this world of Camelot. And then, of course, he winds up on an adventure to figure out what happened, what went wrong, how can they make things right again. And what's really interesting about this book is that it's got stories about these kind of either made up or unexplored characters in Arthurian mythology, and so it uses this story as a platform to explore a lot of these really interesting characters. Or Lev Grossman writes them in a really interesting way, and there are trans characters, there are gay characters, there are characters who are kind of dealing with repressed trauma, and the book explores how they deal with that, and it's really, really interesting, and it's got some really cool stuff in it. It's a very bloated book. It's like 600 plus pages, and there's a lot of stuff that like I was like, this does not need to be in here. But that said, it's still a very fun read, and you can get through it pretty quickly. And I really enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed it a lot more than I enjoyed The Magicians, which I bounced off of because I found the characters to be insufferable back in the day when I started reading that. But this I really liked. And it's a cool story. It's got some really interesting characters, some characters who I really found empathetic and relatable and interesting. It explores King Arthur mythology in a way that I haven't seen before. For example, Merlin is not portrayed as this wizened wizard who is sees the future and helps everybody. He is portrayed as this terrible predator, which again, just kind of a subversion on the mythology that I thought was pretty cool. Morgan Le Fay is also portrayed as someone you would not expect if you are familiar with King Arthur mythology. It's also, I think that it's certainly helpful to read this knowing the names of certain characters or having some base familiarity with Arthurian myth, but still you can read it without that. And I still think that you'll get a lot out of it. And it does wind up getting into, there's a lot of stuff. It's kind of lost-ish in that it goes into the past for a lot of stuff. So you do get a lot of Arthur and Lancelot and Galahad and Gawain and so on and so forth. You do get a lot of the familiar characters, just in the past for the most part. So yeah, nice. Really cool book. The Bright Sword, love Grossman. I really enjoyed it. Just be aware that it's pretty bloated and there might be some parts where you're like, man, I want to skip a few pages here and there. But other than that, I really liked it.
Did it feel like there would be more books in this series, or is it a standalone?
Totally standalone story.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, that's great.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. And it's very much about there are really interesting, broader themes. I keep using the word interesting, but that's just what I think of it. There's some really thought-provoking, broader themes about the past and letting go of it and moving on and rebuilding the future and what that looks like. It's definitely left me thinking a lot about the story.
That doesn't surprise me. Yeah, given the direction that The Magicians goes, where I definitely understand bouncing off the first book because Quentin is such a turd in that book and it's kind of exhausting. Those books, I think the next two books become very strong and are very interesting in that they're exploring all these ideas of storytelling and fantasy and escape and what it means to what a fantasy escape gives us from our lives and what it means to let go of something that you've created. And actually, referring to our topic last week, there's a lot of cartography, and I think it's in book 2 of The Magicians. There's a very great subplot where the cartographer joins his crew and they're
fun.
Sailing a vessel around and drawing maps, and
cool.
It's very cool.
That is neat.
They draw the Marauders map. Is that what they draw?
No,
right,
it's an adult version of
right,
that.
An adult
it's
Marauders
very adult.
Map. Yeah. It shows you where all the porn is.
Yeah.
It's funny because the fantasy Hogwarts thing, the adult Hogwarts thing, that's mostly true of the first book because books 2 and 3, they leave the school behind. It really becomes this it actually is more Narnia. It's the whole premise is that the Narnia books, they're called something else in Magicians, but they're they're real and Narnia exists. There is a fantasy world and magic flows through it and they wind up going there. And then a lot of the story winds up being about finding the real version of this fantasy escape that you always dreamed about as a kid, and then what it means to go there and like meet the people there and the people who live there and like how it interfaces with our world. And it stops being like we're at school but we all have sex and do drugs because we're teenagers or whatever. It's college and not grade school. So
Gotcha.
Yeah. Anyways, whatever. That's a tangent. I really am excited to read The Bright Sword. I've got a copy and I'm just waiting to read it.
Yeah, it's cool. I think you'll like it. All right, that is it for this week's episode. Kirk, Maddy, I'll see you both next time.
Yeah, see you next time.
Bye.
Triple Click is produced by Jason Schreier, Maddy Myers, and me, Kirk Hamilton. I edit and mix the show and also wrote our theme music. Our show art is by Tom DJ. Some of the games and products we talked about on this episode may have been sent to us for free for review consideration. You can find a link to our ethics policy in the show notes. Triple Click is a proud member of the Maximum Fun Podcast Network, and if you like our show, we hope you'll consider supporting us by becoming a member at MaximumFun.org/join. Find us on Twitter at TripleClickPod, send email to tripleclick@MaximumFun.org, and find a link to our Discord in the show notes. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
Supported
directly
by you.